Looks like no one came. Alright. Oh, God, what were we supposed to talk about today? Was it set discussion or something? Or you guys want a Harumi episode, right? Oh boy. Oh god. There's no one else here, huh? We might as well talk about sets, evidently. I don't think we've done that yet this year. Oh, a lot of stuff coming out, right? Not in Chaga for the next half of the year. I mean, what are you gonna do, you know? Alright, let's see. Damn. So we talked about C-bound discussion. We had a C-bound discussion last episode or so, or a couple episodes back, and since then the sets have been revealed. They were revealed almost immediately, and no one else is here. I might as well put my opinions out on these things. Gee, I wonder. Let's see, hydromech subspecies. That's very few, actually. I was expecting more. There are only 5. It's really interesting. I mean, the first year's wave was like 5 as well, so it's certainly interesting that there are 5. What is it? Hydromech is neat. I honestly really like that one. It's a charmer, but like, it's not great on its own. It has some issues, some gaps. Definitely has weird proportions and some weird connections, which I think I've seen a mock somewhere that's a little better. I am a mockist. I should probably shout out some fellow mockists. Follow me on _ Grammatical, or I might have changed it actually. Instagrammatical. I don't know. The point is, what is it? The hydromech, I think there's this guy named Jack Harlan who made a pretty good hydromech revamp. He's already got him because it's over there in June. The set's already dropped, so give him a follow. Jack _ Harlan. He made a pretty neat hydromech revamp. It's a neat set. It's got the essentials. You got a ninja, a snake guy. And, I mean, what else could you ask for, really, for a $20 set? Normally, those are just Ninja, Snake Guy, and, unless you want, like, a really minimal build with 5 figures or something. I mean, gee, I wouldn't want that, right? Anyways, is this thing on? Okay, good. Subspeeder. Oh, this cringe thing. The car that just crashes and burns. Damn. Ignore that. What is it? It's a neat car. It doesn't have very much functionality. I guess it... he drowns, right? Yeah, he drowns in that scene. Man, talk about using your product placement right. Water tracking. Water tracking's good. I mean, you're getting a dragon here, which is always neat. Love dragon. Love Nia's figure. I mean, you get to do her in 2 forms. From what I've seen, it's got a function. Zayn, who is, hard to find in this wave. Oh, the Temple of the Endless Sea. I'm gonna be honest, I'm not a fan. I'm just not a fan of this one. It's got way too much going on for my tastes. It's okay. It's got some good plays, good things in it, but then you get to Wojira, and some of the side builds are underwhelming, and overall it just feels too tiny. And the Hydra bounty, which is good because it's the bounty. I mean, I've got the hair pieces, which is neat. I'd be down to have more of those guys. More hair pieces, the better. And only set with Nia, and it's the most expensive one. Congrats, Lego, you've managed to do this again. Only set with Nia. It was the same with the Winter Wave too. Nia being exclusive one set, Zane being one of the more affordable ninja. Most of this lines up actually pretty well. What is it? You've got the $20 Lloyd vehicle. They skipped the $30 bracket, which is usually a really cool bracket. 50 and 60, which are also usually pretty cool. I believe that was taken up by Legacy, which has a $50 dragon. I'm not sure about 60, but $70 for the Raider, which I can go into later. But it's really interesting as far as Seabound sets go. It's 5 sets. You just added a single set bracket for this, but everything lines up. You've got the mech or the Lloyd vehicle for 20, a dragon, a location, and a big boat or 2 boats. Same thing for each wave. You just added in a J car. Brilliant ideas, guys. More vehicles, less vehicles from the bad guy side, more in quotes, vehicles for the good guy side. Might be part of why Seabound just didn't work as well as like last summer's wave. I mean, Moten, that's a good comparison. I feel like I compare these 2 seasons too much. Or Master of the Mountain. Solid sub theme, by the way, unless I remember. This is not just 5 sets, it's 6 sets. It gets to share less, but you get your ninja very easily, except for Kai. Kai doesn't deserve anything, but you get the ninja easily, you get a good amount of locations. The 6 sets given to you, offered, are all fairly different, and they all fit into their theme. You don't get like weird text stuff that just vaguely resembles its source. It's got the Rhino, which is very different. God, it's just neat that Master of the Mountain did this, Honestly, the Mountain Wave, this has been a thing I've always noticed about these waves. It seems like with a more recent Ninjago, they typically lean on whatever sets they have at the time. And they've got this predicament with the summer sets because typically the summer wave is huge, but you don't get to do much nowadays. Seems like most of it's taken up by Legacy. And the more interesting part, actually, is that, The more interesting part is really just that with Motem, they did use basically all 6 sets. The location was entirely in one place, and it was at the end, in the finale, it's just all 6 sets in battle, all 6 sets involved in some battle to some capacity. Well, actually 5 of the 6, but they're all involved, and they're all present in this location. All the characters are involved in these sets, and it's definitely an interesting choice as far as the stuff goes. Prime Empire, I think, did not do a similar thing. They had a dragon battle. That was cool. But if I recall, Prime Empire mostly kind of created its own locations. You ended up with like pieces of the gamers market here and there, and different locations that weren't advertised in the sets at all. Different parts of the video game world, different parts of Unagami. Really, you really get down to it. That's what Prime Empire is. Just one mad AI that they didn't really handle well, huh? Damn, they're real smart, aren't they? But let's see here. Yeah, it's just neat to see how the Prime Empire stuff went, as well as the Master of the Mountain stuff. And I know with seasons, or the secrets, they ended up just like doing a very small wave. Yeah, it's interesting to see how these sets like lead into their themes as well. I mean, with Seabound, it's a very, very very distinct kind of like wave where it's mostly the ninja versus Kalmar more than the ninja in Merlopia or the ninja observing a new kind of civilization and maybe learning something about themselves. In Master of the Mountain, they're stuck on home turf and they have to learn the people's kind of habits. But with Seabound, it's like 90% just like hopping from place to place. And that's really another thing about Seabound, huh? It really just did feel like, what is it? The ninja were kind of like fighting a single enemy and not really getting an idea of his presence or his motives. I mean, certainly Wojira, but when you really get down to it, it does feel a little empty, even if it has great emotional moments and great stakes and very good character moments. Like, Seabound just feels empty to some capacity. Not in the same way Possession does, because, I mean, Possession is just completely devoid of anything regarding character. It's well composed, and it's very well composed. I mean, every season is well composed, but also it's also very well created, executed, and I mean, Possession feels factory made, if anything. I realize this is not a very popular opinion, but I mean that's the thing with Possession, huh? It's a season most kids like, but when you really get down to it, it's very empty and very devoid of what could make it interesting, character stakes, elements of it that could be deeper or whatnot. Let's see if I can get this to work. Sorry, I've been building a thing on my end. And speaking of which, I mean, interesting thing about like using each wave of sets to like advertise your thing. Might as well finish the Seabound tangent. What is it? It feels like they're just fighting a single person, and that person isn't well developed. Our man Calamar. Nor do we understand his world, or the politics he comes from, or the world he comes from, the politics of that world, or whatnot. We understand there are eel people here, the Mare, Merlopians, etc. I have no idea what they're named. Mare eels. Is that right? I hope that's right. Okay, please don't break on me. Seabound, you don't get that kind of, overabundant kind of large feeling.
Well, like Master of the Mountain, you get an idea of the world. It's written where you get a concrete understanding of why things work the way they do, how things work into each other, and I mean, I said I was gonna hold a whole episode for this, maybe. I think I've referenced it multiple times. What is it? Master of the Mountain has these really good themes built up in it, and it's something that is missing from Seabound. You're missing the whole thing dealing with what is it? Our villain characters' backstories. That's typically actually a dumb excuse, but the our villains like genuine kind of pathos, the motives. You don't get a connection between Nia or Kalmar. And now that I think about it, you don't really. You would think Nia would be more important in the overarching uh, course of the thing. I know they mention it. It's hinted at in episode 4, and then dropped promptly in episode 5 or 6. And there's a lack of consistency there, actually. But yeah, with Seabound, you don't really get an idea of what the ninja have landed themselves into this time. And I mean, that's where Ninjago is, right? The ninja land themselves into a new mess every season, and they have to work themselves out of it. And certainly it's a thing they figure out. So, with Mass of the Mountain, I think they've done it best there. Secrets was just fun and games, and then walking into another thing that Wu did, and in fact, I mean, it benefits from that entire thing where they kind of fall into the incident, the issue. Uh, huh, this is funny. Oh God. Oh God, I have not drank enough in a while. Sorry about the silence there, and the noises, and anything else that happens to persist. Uh, yeah, but with Master of the Mountain, I think it's interesting how they choose to delve into the world. Like I said, Prime Empire delves into the world uh, using like the video game as a means to display a different idea. I still feel like it's missed opportunity to like delve into the psyche of another person, or the closest you can, since at first it's an AI gone rogue, and second it is a video game. But honestly, yeah, Prime Empire's missed potential because you do have the potential of having a genuinely emotional story, uh, looking into the mind of a really troubled person, and yet we don't get that, and that's fine. Certainly, they can try again, or you can write your own. But is that Secrets is fun. They walk into Asphira and basically her relationship to Wu as being betrayed, and they kind of walk. The entire thing with Asphira is treated like a joke because it is. You're here to have fun. That was the entire point of that season, and that's how it's treated. That's why people don't like Asphira, and yet she is a solid villain because she has a solid presence. As far as Master of the Mountain goes, it takes the world idea to a greater extent because, like, as far as like ninja villains go, it's a lot more interesting when the ninja end up in the their opponent's home turf instead of having to what is it walk or having to slip in, I guess, or having to take care of it from their home turf, defending their place. After all, they've already developed Ninjago City fairly well. The Sons of Garmadon and whatnot. They're interested in walking behind. It is, after all, a little more kid friendly, so certainly a darker kind of a darker kind of politics in Ninjago City are easier to overlook. And I mean, even typically teens aren't interested or are uncomfortable with the entire idea that a city might not be all that's cracked up to be, or a place. And so you get these different worlds, and I'm fine with that. And Master of the Mountain does it the best, probably. Seabound just is lacking because what is it? You don't get an idea of Merlopia. Kalmar, or it is reduced to just Kalmar and his army, and ultimately, Kalmar and his control over Wojira, his brief control over Wojira before she breaks loose and doesn't get to do the damage she is alleged to cause, because, as we have heard up until this point, she's a very strong force and evidently capable of striking fear in more than one realm. But no, she is quietly and very quickly dismissed of uh, mm, and so that's just the whole thing, isn't it? But with Master of the Mountain, I think might as well just go into this in depth. I've kept you guys waiting long enough, and I'm sure you know my theory. Uh, if you don't, I'm not going to tell you what exactly yet. But Master Mountain creates its own incredibly interesting idea. Prime Empire is the AI world, the delving into a robot mind essentially, and it's well, Seabound. Not now. I can't really see it. It does much. I know the ice chapter. No, fire chapter's fun. Prime and President. Look, the point is, Master of the Mountain. It creates a very, very strong and interesting alien almost fantasy world. Not an alien world, just a straight up. When I say alien, I mean it in the more abstract sense, or not an abstract sense. Come on. Uh, Essentially, the sense of it being different from the normal kind of world. You get these certainly these different looking people with certain technologies. One could almost consider it magic, and and what is it? The a whole setting really. But what's really interesting with Master of the Mountain is that this is a fantasy world, but it isn't really just confined to being a fantasy. It has something to say, much like Prime Empire had something close enough to saying with the AI world. I mean, you arrive at this. We arrive with the ninja, I suppose. You, the viewer, in this fantasy world. Shintaro, a rich city on a mountain, which I'm sure is not at all a metaphor, huh? Uh, just to or to be like welcomed in as heroes, or at, in reality, a daughter's birthday party, the king's daughter's birthday party. I mean, it's hinted that Shintaro is huge, and they've been invited for some important reason, and it's her birthday party or her birthday. It's it's not something that's delved on or noted satirically, but it's certainly funny in a way that they came for her birthday party, and they come to this city on the mountain with its sparkling uh, spires. God, what are those bulbs called in Muslim architecture? It's got the little thingies, the little bulbs. Certainly, the architecture. I don't think it has much. We don't get sets of them, first of all, but also it doesn't really have much to do. Oh, yeah, minarets. It doesn't have much to do with, like, say, association with Muslims as much as it is an association with, like, wealth or power. And certainly these men on the top of the mountain, as masters of the mountain, have a lot of power. So yeah, uh, as master of the mountain, uh, King Vangelis invites the ninja to his daughter's birthday party uh, on this floating city in the sky with minarets topping the towers and buildings and whatnot. Damn, this prose fucking sucks. The point is, the point is, what is it? Uh, they don't really have a discernible reason to come here. Uh, they come here because the king needs to like please his daughter, so he can get back to whatever he's doing. And it is not said what he's doing. He is a king. He's a figurehead, allegedly. Uh, he and he's a nice guy, I guess. At least it seems from the outset, which is incredibly good way to introduce your character. Nice guy from the outset, seemingly a doting, wonderful father, and a good king. And I mean, given Ninjaga's histories with like the existing rule or kings or whatnot, I mean, aside from say Natakan, who is a prince, this guy seems fine. After all, they just the ninja. It's been a couple years, but like they just finished restoring Ninjago to its former glory, or not to its former glory, but to normalcy. And the king here would be assumed to be like a nice, wonderful guy, but he isn't. and we get into that later on. But essentially, because he invites these ninja over, people he doesn't really care about, uh, but who his daughter worships, essentially. Uh, I'm not going to say he has an abusive relationship with his daughter. I'm not sure if abusive relationships end up with people who end up who talk like Vanya or behave like Vanya. She is, in a way, also upper class, distinctly upper class. Her interests are banal and very trite, and yes, she's a very likable character. She's a very interesting character, but she's also not a particularly uh, noble or interesting, not a particularly interesting character. She's a likable character. I didn't say interesting earlier, I hope, because then I would be contradicting myself in the span of a minute. Uh, but the point is, what is it? Vanya, being the king's daughter, uh, is a bright, happy girl, and she is completely oblivious to her father's duties. And one of the ninja, I believe, Cole, he stumbles upon a weird, purple creature, and they bring it up. Uh, it's basically it's neglected, and the entire thing is basically the beginning of the end of of the king's rule. But uh, the idea here is that things are not as they seem on Shintaro. Uh, Certainly with the wealth of the citizens and what little we get to see of them. We know they grow to old age. We know they're doing fine. They reap many of the benefits of an upper or a first class country or a first class nation or whatnot. They're certainly wealthy. They don't have very many problems. We don't get to see much of them, and that's a real shame, honestly, because I'd like to know what they were doing just with that part of the time. Anyways, Cole manages to slip underneath because uh, Prince or King Vangelis is incredibly bad at managing his children, and so Vanya, who is bored out of her mind, living in a first world country and longing for adventure, ends up accidentally dropping Cole into the heart of the mountains, which have been locked up and are in fact home to prison camps for labor. Yeah, certainly that's interesting, isn't it, fellas? Uh, you know, illegal mining, an illegal mining operation. Uh, we get the entire thing with what is it, King Van or with the Skull Sorcerer. This is sounding like a recap, isn't it? You guys have all seen the season, right? I feel like I should probably cut this down instead of just fucking recapping the entire thing. Like the points are, Shintaro is a big old city in the sky, and it's certainly very well off. The king, I mean, their issues are minimal enough that the only reason the ninja are invited at all is because the king needs to entertain his daughter, to make sure she feels good because I mean all they can afford it. The ninja at this point are basically just like traveling circus men. No, I mean the last adventure they'd had was in a video game. The one before that was kind of to save another one of their people. The one before that, Asphira, was almost negligible in how quickly they defeated as well. And of course, there was the entire thing with Garmadon and the Oni, which were their biggest threat. At this point, they're facing decline. They're facing irrelevance almost. I would argue. even if I do, I like the way that Ninjago twists its kind of uh, theme each year. But now they're being invited for a party because this first world country only, this peaceful country, only needs ninja to entertain them. Oh. Well, the thing about first world countries, even like the Swedish Nordic social democracies, is that you need money to make things work. I mean, certainly in America, we would love to have like a little bit of healthcare, right? All right, fellas. I'm certain you would love to not, go bankrupt on your because say you had a heart attack once, or or someone accidentally crashed their car into you and you ended up having to handle the hospital fees, or gee, I don't know, an earthquake, you know, causes you to, suffer some incident and you end up with huge hospital fees. I realize I'm doing fucking stupid comparisons here or stupid examples. Certainly a heart condition, for example, or a certain organ condition, any condition. This is not that podcast. The point is, we don't have that, and we'd love it. But the thing is that shit comes at a price, and that price is labor. The suffering of other countries, the suffering of, say, look in Indonesia, where capitalism is booming, and people are doing just great over there, huh? Because, at the end of the day, your shit comes at a price. Everything you buy is, has a tendency to be like sourced from somewhere else. And so the point here is that, Shintaro, as a first world country, relies on money. It needs money to maintain itself. And in fact, that is brought up almost immediately when the Skull Sorcerer is revealed to be the king. And as I stated earlier, it's interesting to view this for the first time, and it's interesting to view this for on rewatch. And you don't even need to rewatch it really. When it is revealed that Vangelis is a Skull Sorcerer, it is completely in line with what he would do. Of course, the fucking king would be a maniac or would rule over his or would install fucking labor camps or whatnot, and of course he would fucking just extract wealth. The guy needs to make money, and he needs to make his city look pretty. Oof. Oh, that sucks. But that's certainly one thing that is a prominent part of the season. It straight up, very head-on, confronts the idea that, perfection comes at a price. I believe that's what the line is in the show. And, you end up seeing it in demonstration. You have these incredibly poor laborers and these incredibly rich upper uh, upper stratosphere, or incredibly rich people in the upper strata. What did I say, stratosphere? Damn, you're thinking of meteorology, aren't you, buddy? But these incredibly rich upper strata fellas just taking the fucking cash. Just taking the fucking cash off of um, people who don't own the labor that they do, but who work regardless. And certainly work they do. Oh boy. We're introduced to the Munts and the Geckos in episode 1, almost. We're introduced to a Gecko, the purple creatures, in episode 1, and in episode 2, we are introduced to the months, to complement them. And I mean, it is regarded in the show, I think, the months and geckos. Well, there's the fact that they have a whole disagreement, and that they're two distinct tribes. And I mean, they look very distinct. It's almost too much distinction. The designers should have just considered making them similar, but at the same time, orcs and goblins, it's got to maintain from the fantasy theme. But what's ingenious is that, I mean, you guys know where, you don't know where orcs and goblins originate from, maybe you do. The fantasy idea, stems from the post-war era, and certainly repurposes like older myths from certain Anglo-Saxon traditions. I'm speaking out of my ass here. The idea that you've got goblins and orcs, and I'm not sure what kind of metaphor these are. I gotta wonder. You got these big, strong, very laconian. God, if I said laconic, if I said laconian, that would be fucking a different, very different kind of meaning. But these very tall, laconic, creatures of a distinctly different skin color. And then you've got the goblins, who are infamously tiny, scheming, very verbose, and very, very interesting fellows. I wonder what kind of allegory these guys fit into. The point is that here they're the proletariat. It's a good move on the writer's part. You end up with these proletarian, these workers essentially, and in true fashion, they are, what is it? Already. Oh. Anyways, yeah, in true fashion, they are both incredibly oppressed, and we are, led to learn that their oppressor is a skull sorcerer, and I've already mentioned who he is, because I do not have any of this fucking monologue planned out. But the point here is that they both suffer under the tyranny of the bourgeois. I hope that sounded right. Bourgeois or bourgeois? Fuck the French. But the point here is that, what is it? They're workers, and they do the work for an evil kind of an evil tyrant, and they are mining Vengestone. This might be the part of the part of the theme where context is key, because for the most part this season is almost entirely like separated from Ninjago, but with the Months and Geckos, with the Vengestone part, man, you have these verbal tics all the time, huh? With the Vengestone, you understand what the point is. Essentially, in this construct, Vengestone is basically a mineral that has no purposes, honestly. It exists to mute your powers. Narratively, it has a purpose, and that is to weaken the ninja, make a fight more interesting. Smart move. And because this is where Vengestone comes from, as we learn, it immediately just like stops the ninja's powers. Cole tries to escape. He can't. He's immediately oppressed by the the guard, the vanguards of the bourgeois. Vanguard is not the right use here. Probably should just use the praetorian, or just the guard of the bourgeois class. These ugly skeleton warriors, uh, these undead creatures who have been awakened by an oppressive force and forced to subjugate their fellow man, but they are no longer alive and they no longer play a role in actively considering whether or not they should be doing this. There's no morality to it. They exist to serve the system. And not to get too political, what is it? Cole is immediately put to slave camp. This is an interesting kind of look at. I said I wasn't going to do recaps. And I realize this entire fucking discussion is falling apart at the seams. But, you know, what is it? We've got the whole metaphor, right? There's a big mountain. I'm going to do a TLDR right now. There's a big mountain. At the top, you've got the richest people who don't give a shit about what happens inside, and in fact are completely out of the know. That their fucking first world conditions are propagated by the continuation of bourgeois tyranny and the strength of labor, or no, sorry, the oppression of workers. And inside of the mountain, there's an illegal mining operation full of these people who have been completely hidden from a normal person's life, who have their own distinct cultures, and hmm, who have their own distinct cultures, and who are slowly being pushed out of their world by the oppressive force of capitalism. And that's the word, is that not? Uh, After all, this is a bourgeois tyrant who doesn't produce any labor, who needs these workers, who deeply needs these workers, and gets uses their work uh, to create his own wealth. And he needs these workers enough that he'll force them back into labor. He'll punish them if they try to leave, and he'll try to acquire as many workers who are as much of a commodity as the Vengestone itself. He'll try to acquire as many workers as he can, as much labor as he can, for the purposes of for the purposes of making himself richer and his country even better off. Oh. And the Vengestone itself is fucking worthless. We know, once again, it has that narrative purpose, but it does not need to be there. It needs to be cut out, or sorry, it doesn't have anything more than a monetary interest. Certainly, I don't think it powers anything. It's used solely to to mute, to oppress, to stop the ninja's powers, or just completely muffle him, to muffle the ninja's powers. And for that end, it's clear that, I mean, this is built up for later seasons, which is very funny. The ninja are fighting a Vengestone buyer, and it is directly stated that they are fighting a buyer, a guy who participates in the transaction of money. Wonderful, wonderful. And so we have this whole dichotomy set up. I suppose you've got it's very direct, and the ninja come in here, and as I've already stated multiple times, they come in here for a trifle, for a trivial event, and they exist in this space to to provide entertainment. But because they're the ninja, they end up, facing multiple coincidences that open their eyes to things that are not, in fact, in their purview. Uh, Things that are, active suffering, tyranny, and oppression. And what's definitely more interesting about this dichotomy is that when the ninja end up, you know, in the camps and when they're separated, you get a hint of what your working class is like. Your Munts and your Geckos. The originally uses racial stereotypes, as you know. Now, I hope. You've got the well, they themselves are in fact racist to each other. They have certain descriptors for each other uh, that basically are just tamer versions of things that you could say. And eventually we learned that their swords were lost. Two swords that are identical but different in the fact that they are colored in an opposite parallel way. About parallel way. You have the ivory sword and the shadow blade. Well, that doesn't sound dark. I mean, that doesn't sound edgy at all. But the ivory sword is white with a black hilt. The shadow blade is a black sword with a white hilt, or white blade and white hilt. And that entire thing is a clear metaphor for, a unity between two. It's a yin yang in a way. But unlike the yin yang, I mean, the yin yang isn't really like deliberately saying that one side is bad, the other side is good, and they are in eternal conflict. It's just a loop. But in this way, the blades, which have both been stolen, uh, are are alleged to have been stolen by the other tribe, and so this racism is built on, well, the obvious differences, and very likely that was what precipitated it before the stealing of the blades kind of like caused the entire, or, were the catalyst to the to the whole relationship falling apart. And we get to see that these people have their own cultures as well. Uh, it's a good move to always like characterize your proletarian characters. They are people, after all, and they are not perfect people. Uh, Certainly, some of them have hang-ups, and they might be jealous, they might not be particularly smart, or they might have very irrational beliefs. But they are people nonetheless, and they must be treated that way, even though they're short and purple or green and tall and barbaric looking. But you know, uh, it it is noted that they have a whole two episodes, one for each one, for each what is it for each tribe to develop. And this is another thing that the wild brain seasons are getting better at. Uh, you know, with Wilfilm seasons, you with the 22-minute format, you can get very good long form stories. But the longer you get, the more you need. I mean, it's a weird place. 11-minute episodes are short and to the point, and you typically make those kinds of shows, 11-minute episode shows, more episodic almost. Whereas with long form shows, 40 minutes to an hour, they're also very often episodic because you can tell a whole story in 40 minutes to an hour. Uh, as we know from Ninjago, we've got 40-minute specials which tell whole stories. Your opinion as far as the quality goes. 22 minutes are a weird place though, because you have to tell a story. You have to make sure it is told within that time frame. But the downside is that it is constricted by its time. It is not short enough to tell a short but concise and very interesting story that goes into the pantheon, goes into the kind of layup of the season as like fucking hell, I can't fucking find a word. It goes into the catalog as a solid standalone episode and carries over through the narrative. And you cannot do a 40-minute episode which also does the same thing, but a full story. You can get more nuances in a 40-minute episode. With 20 minutes, you can do a good solid standalone episode. But for the most part, you end up orienting yourself towards serialization because you've got so much time. Avatar does 22 minutes pretty well, if I remember. That show. I know there's a really good show I saw a while back, 5 years ago actually. Cowboy Bebop. Real wonderful show. It's very episodic, and each episode is its own self-contained story, and certainly can do the 22-minute thing. But it eventually just came back to its central story, which it did not really address as much as often as it want. No, it didn't try to, or want to address it as often as it did. With 20 minutes, you're obligated to take a longer time to make a longer story that not only satisfies, you know, a single standalone episode, but also acts as like, a piece of a longer overarching plot. Overarching plot. Ninjago's been in this kind of funk where it's been doing 22-minute standalones for, or sorry, 22-minute serialized stories for a while. I should probably when I realize I'm just talking out of my ass here because when you get into the entire serialized versus uh, standalone debate, the monster of the week versus serialized, there's no better way to do a story. You can do it however you want. But certainly it's interesting that Ninjago has been serialized for a while, and if anything, they've been relying on it. You got to fill 22 minutes with the most interesting or just the most plot you can get into an episode. And you harken back to the old days, season one, maybe season two. I know people don't like the filler episodes because 22 minutes is too long for filler episodes. That's the thing. But with season or with episodic episodes, sometimes if it doesn't have character to it. But anyways, with Master of the Mountain, every episode is essentially part of a serialized or a continuous plot, while also being its own kind of thing. You know, we go over the culture of the months, the culture of the geckos, uh, and then we go into the idea that these people are, or we go into how that relates to the central conflict. And this is honestly as close as the show gets back to Rise of the Snakes, where you would have a singular J episode, or a singular uh, Zane episode, or a singular Lloyd episode, where they have a plot, but then you end up building onto the scene, and or building up onto the enemy, and it's a slow burn until you get to the finale with the Great Devourer, and you care about all the characters involved, and you see what is it, them manage to like beat the main bad guy. But with Master of the Mountain, it is as close as you can get to that because you're going over what is it, the people, and you're building up why this stuff is important to them. You build up why this is important to the months, why this is important to the geckos, why they want to make sure they have a culture and a life underground worth living, and they do not have their culture stamped out by the forces of bourgeois extraction, where they do not have their life, uh, pushed out by the need for capitalism to ground people up into creatures of, or no, into working cogs in a machine, uh, where they're not ground up by like a colonialist, uh, since it's domestic, I might as well use the word fascist. Uh, you know, mobilization, a fascist move to destroy their cultures and dehumanize them and kill you know the rebellious amongst them or the most interested in defecting. And it's of course interesting to note, like obviously this is all you know very distinctly about like a working class versus an elite. But the thing about the elite is that from what we get, their life is fine. They have all the benefits for the most part. We don't know how long. They've recently already abolished, illegal slave mining, but it continues because they need money, and they're doing fine. So, I mean, really, they reap all the benefits of capitalism. They reap, as I've said, much like the Nordics, uh, all the benefits of getting to live in a society where most things are provided to you and most things are treated for you, and you get the veneer of democracy because, as Vangelis says, you the beauty of, or not the beauty of my country. What is it? The power of this country lies within the people, not me, or whatnot. I know he says that in the second episode because it's something that almost gets glossed over, but it is important to or it gets glossed over, but on rewatch you realize he's bullshitting, and of course you happen to know very quickly that of course the king would extract surplus labor, and it fits together. You don't need to rewatch it to understand, but key lines like that give you an understanding that this man is bullshitting and this entire kingdom is bullshit. Uh, Reform isn't enough. Of course, the other part of Master of the Mountain that works really well is, of course, Cole's entire backstory. We get to see him, what is it, grow as a leader, grow in helping people uh, work towards their potentials. Uh, we haven't seen Cole lead for a while. In fact, he's always the ninja who often gets overshadowed. I think this is mostly a thing the show does whenever it is not what the show does though, but it's a thing uh, the show's never really addressed much. But I know it was an important part of its characterization early on. Cole is a leader, and he helps the ninja do what they can, uh, to exercise their talents, but to direct them in a way that makes sense. That sounds like tech bro stuff. I realize that, but at the same time, he's got his own talents, and he helps in them, but he treats his fellow, you know, his fellow fighter, or his fellow teammates, fellow ninja as equals, and he helps direct them towards a smart, useful goal. And you know, it's in a way, I guess, counteractive to or counteractive to the entire metaphor because the ninja do come in as a what's that thing everyone keeps saying that I'm sure is valid, but which I see brought up way too often. They take the white man's burden. No, that's not it. They're white saviors or whatever. That kind of shit. Uh, what is it? They basically they help the workers out of a funk, and certainly they solve racism. And on the other hand, Cole is in an ideal position really because he you get to understand that his motive for fighting off fighting as a ninja is to what is it stop injustice. And this comes back on many things. I know Cube wrote an essay that was wonderful. I'm sure someone can link that. uh, what is it? The entire thing with Cole basically helping other people to grow, but also that his entire like character arc from season 1 to season 13 is consistent in that it is very much a here it's an extension of it, if anything. He's one of the more subtle written characters, and here he gets to express, or we get to express what he is capable of, or what he uh, or who he is as a person, and it reinforces it via like the flashback with his mom and his help, his assistance in motivating and leading the Upply, a faction which I'm sure you guys all know, who basically uncover the thing on a mercenary trip, but because they know too much, need to be cut out before they spread anything amongst the people. And so he's cool. Cole is cool. He certainly got patterns of this in previous seasons. After all, he's the leader. He is in the books. I've stated he helps the ninja realize their unique talents. Uh, in the show, he is the lead. For the first season, he's almost the least noticeable ninja, but then you understand who he is, and he almost seems like the most generic because in his own True Potential episode, it's mostly him telling his dad that he's a ninja and it's okay that he is, and he is accepted. But the more important part is that he's a nice guy and he is motivated to help his fellow teammates, and so we get to see that here, and we get to see a reinforcement from like what he did in tournament, for example, where he helped motivate the workers there. He helped motivate the workers there to form a union, basically. He helped them revolt against Chen and defeat their cultist oppressors, and then in Skybound, I mean, obviously, great character. He has some moments where he's a little dumb, but the important thing is that he's one of the nicer people on the team, obviously. He helps Nia, he helps Jay, and he is integral to well, damn, I don't remember what he was integral to in Skybound. He is certainly a major force in the season there. In season 8, he's one of the ninja who's like most interested in. He's one of the most interested in uh, saving Wu, and he has a very vested interest in what is it, helping the dragon hunters after, or he has a very vested interest in making sure things go fine and they manage to escape. So he's certainly interested in helping his fellow man. Well, that's what happens in Hunted. But yeah, we get an understanding of Cole as someone who helps his friends and who helps incite rebellions for the sake of the people working in them, working under strict conditions. And so with Master of the Mountain, he plays the same role here, Mr. Hammer and Sickle himself, which is an interesting other fact. I would make this joke. He's got a hammer and he's got a scythe. Pre-movie, he's the scythe guy, and post-movie, he is a hammer guy. So he was always destined to be this kind of guy. Yeah, but yeah, you get the idea that Cole is a very motivated person who is close to his fellow ninja and interested in seeing them succeed in whatever they do. Whether or not it's like making sure that they manage to defeat an evil billionaire, or no, sorry, I mean, I would talk about Chen, but defeat an evil like tycoon, or well, the evil fast food tycoon, of course, or defeat the evil ghost demon, the evil fucking hell, the Jin, my boy Nauticon. Or if he's interested in like overthrowing or overthrowing the bourgeois forces that control the system under which two entire tribes are separated and confined to, or confined under. And we get a good idea of what he stands for, and by the end of it, he understands why he's fighting for these people he doesn't know, and he's fighting this fight. He's fighting the good fight for what is it? For their liberation, for them not to be oppressed by those who are cruel and unjust, and for the freedom of the worker to own their work regardless of what kind of work it is. And certainly it might not be like for that end. Conventional mining is not, in fact, treated as good work. If it was, they wouldn't need to be forced into doing it. You know, certainly not under dehumanizing conditions, but also, I mean, mining like that and being treated as basically and non-human, that's all very interesting, huh? So the work is not handled very elegantly, and certainly work sucks. So, uh, well, let's get down to that other and Skull Sorcerer's the Tyrant. Set up the metaphor, right? And I've already set up our characters. And that's the wonderful thing about Master of the Mountain, really. It's a solid season because it creates this whole narrative. It creates the whole. It doesn't really create it necessarily. It doesn't invent it out of, you know, whole cloth. It it takes from a very studied school of philosophy, uh, and you know it pulls from this kind of understanding of the world as causal demand. Oh, oh God. The point is, it is very much a fantastical world, but in a way that what it does that Prime Empire doesn't do, that Seabound tries to do, and in a way gets to but doesn't really. That the island does, but then forgets about the otherworldly part and also an engaging narrative. It creates a fantastical world that resonates with people at the moment. It creates a world with interesting characters. It continues character journeys, and it enhances some journeys from other pieces of media or from other seasons, and it uses its time wisely in that it uses every 10-minute episode to develop a single narrative, and the narrative's coherent. After all, you have the mountain metaphor. You know, certainly that isn't new. You've got the upper class people up in the top. You've got the lower class fellows hidden from sight and forced to labor. And you've got them dehumanized. You have an insight into their cultures and their beliefs, and then you understand why they believe in certain things and why, or no, not why they believe in certain things and why they don't believe. That's fucking stupid shit. Uh, you get an idea of what they're doing to, or what they're facing Uh, you get like certainly like even though the Skull Sorcerer's army isn't huge, it's his turf, it's his terrain. You understand this mountainous zone is not, a great place, and so the mountainous zone is, and like you, even with whatever we get, how little we do, we understand that this man and his big dragon and his army of evil skeletons are way more than what the normal people of Shintaro have. Certainly, they don't have very much training in fighting. They have enough that they conduct, trials by combat and trials by what is it, or what is it, snail races? That's not, trials by combat essentially for succession or to prove innocence. And we get an idea that if you unite with your fellow worker and uh, educate those around you of the injustice of this common enemy, which is important. If you educate them on that, you can overthrow them. And I'm sure this is important because, this is a kid's show selling toys. And it is a theme that you would not expect. I certainly didn't expect it. And, yeah, when it comes down to it, the most important part of this season was that you got to see uh, the ninja. What is it? You get to see the ninja fight against a force of oppression, and you get it addressed how that force of oppression operates, what it does with its certainly what it does with its wealth, why the irrationality of accumulating this much wealth, the suffering that accumulating wealth begets, the injustice of this class system, and the need to stop these kinds of people. People who extract wealth from a labor system, and that extract wealth using other people and do not, take the credit because they themselves are drunk on power and would like to, oppress as many people as possible and have, in fact, been dehumanized, just as they try to dehumanize their workers. Uh, After all, Skull Sorcerer, Armin Vangelis, is interested in just subjugating the people for the sake of his kingdom. In a way, he dissociates, not very much, and yes, he's flat, but he's got an army, he's got a magical skull, he's got his dragon, and he's got a bunch of forces of power, and not only that, but he relies on the psychological manipulation of the people or obfuscation of issues. He relies on their innate racism, which they can still, uh, override, or they can still uh, get past. Essentially, he relies on their innate racism and their alleged naivete. He underestimates them. He underestimates Cole at the end, and hopes that by calling him naive or by calling him you know not half the fighter that his mother was or whatnot, he can keep from losing. And after all, he does need them. And certainly one thing that we miss about the Skull Sorcerer is that he might in fact be scared that he loses his power. Certainly, he's not written very nuanced, but that's the thing that is present in most uh, visual interests. After all, you crave power, you are scared of losing it, and you're interested in acquiring more. That is the guiding light of capitalism. You are scared of power, you are Scared of, I mean, no, you're interested in power, you're scared of losing it, and you're interested in acquiring more ways to maintain that power and more of that power or capital in a way, in this sense. So with that, Cole, of course, and the other ninja come to realize what their purpose is on the mountain, something that was not present at the beginning, and they come to help fight and radicalize these people on the mountain who are not, in fact, aware of this, you know, ongoing oppression of their people, or they're aware. Uh, oh, but essentially, he makes them aware, or he helps them like unite in a way and fight the bourgeois. In his final moments, he himself becomes aware that a skull sorcerer is in fact afraid of like this loss of power, and also aware of his own power. And in a really moving moment, he destroys the skull sorcerer's power in a wonderfully timed, wonderfully scored, Spinjitzu burst, the fullest expression of himself, and he helps liberate the people who, despite their best efforts, were being, you know, uh, destroyed by the forces of capital. Because in the stage, the forces of capital are, immense, and it is hard to fight them off. Now, I realize I've already stated that this is in a way socialist or it's leftist or whatever. Obviously, like when it comes down to it, it's not necessarily like leftist in the conventional sense. I mean, I do mean like certain art may identify these kinds of issues. You identify that there is a working class that is oppressed by the force of capital. You identify that these workers are separated by racism. You identify that the important class issue here is in fact being obscured by this racism. You identify that people, the entire purpose of capital is to get more, and to stay rich, and not and to keep it for your fellow man. And regardless of your delusion or your denials, it is wholly to accumulate more capital and eventually just end up in a pretty bad slog, huh? Even in the best capitalist countries where uh, you know basic needs are provided and things are well kept. And this is why I would like more Shintaran stuff. I'd like to see what goes on up there. Are the citizens feeling depressed? Are they feeling like their lives are meaningless, or if they might not be doing something? They curious about how they're getting so much wealth. Was there a Shintaran who potentially like tried to figure out what was going on behind the scenes and got, I don't know, killed or dropped in the pit like the Upley, but didn't make it out? Maybe even, well, Dungeon Party does the trick, but the thing is they're all outsiders. At the end of the day, it identifies that, yeah, the problem, or this problem cannot be solved by debating, and it cannot be solved by depression. Even Cole, even Wu, uh, even the ninja just experienced this kind of ennui, this very desolate kind of feeling of just not being able to do anything. But they can do things. They can lead the proletariat. They can help fight against their oppressors, despite the fact that their oppressors can just come back in greater numbers, or can withstand more blows, or have more force than they do. And they realize they can go up against them even if they are silent. And, well, then you can do the spinjitzu. You can do a giant uh, orange tornado and just blow up the main source of power. Yeah, that's really how revolution succeeds, isn't it, fellas? Oh God, I haven't drank water. I haven't drank a cup in a while. God, I really hope my voice isn't going. Yeah, the important thing is that this is made clear too. The kids who buy these sets, and it's very likely they're, upper class, uh, upper middle class, semi-bourgeois, because we are, I mean, because this is an English language show, it is very likely that bourgeois kids, after all, upper middle class in America is bourgeois, very bourgeois to the rest of the world, and even in other American countries, and even in the Nordic countries, in Denmark or in the peripheral countries, close to the goddamn heart of empire. But what's important is that it does identify this for those kids. And this may be a commercial, but it's important to identify that things are good and bad. And in a piece of media, it's very, very refreshing to see this kind of thing tackled, especially in a show designed to sell toys to kids at high price points. Uh, and I mean, really, that was what got me into this, or got me interested in this. I couldn't get it out of my head. I was just thinking, the season's really good, and it's got the beliefs I've got, and damn. Uh, but at the same time, it is in its own way. I mean, the solution at the end is still basically liberal. They give it to the queen, Anya. Oh shit, I was gonna build up on that last point where I was gonna say something about how Vanya works as a stand-in for those bourgeois kids. After all, she is born into that family, but she, unlike that, unlike what you would expect, she has a heart and she tries her best to act in a humanitarian sense. She abandons her wealth to save Cole and to save these people who she has seen with her own eyes are being oppressed and completely immobilized in this place. But I mean, in a way, she is, after all, she's made aware of this, and it's probably better that she is not. She's only a player in this fight, if anything. And show, I mean, does the show really treat her like that? I feel like it does. I'm not certain. I may have to rewatch it to see if Vanya is treated more like a single cog in this giant, you know, coalescing effort to liberate the working class. But after all, I mean, she saves that one Geckel. But after all, she manages to make things work, or she's got a good heart. And the point is that it is possible for first world citizens to understand that their government is not good. Maybe even their father isn't good, and to rebel against that, to uh, consider morals over profit. And certainly we have a lot of those in America. Uh, it's good to see the show is orienting itself towards that kind of demographic. But yeah, it resonated with me. I thought it was ingenious. I thought it was a wonderful way to just tie in an emotional narrative with a very, very much not that subtle, but and very much on the nose, but very important kind of statement and a very impactful. But the more important part was the impactful kind of relation these characters had to this narrative, and certainly what each character stood for, what the characters had to deal with. After a Colt's journey isn't made you know secondary to this proletarian uprising. If anything, it helps him reinforce his understanding. He goes into his own funk. Nearly every character goes into their own funk. I know Wu has a funk because he's that builds up from Prime Empire and secrets, and ultimately they figure this stuff out. They figure out that what they need to do in service of this awful behemoth, this awful you know huge freight train, I guess, this juggernaut of uh, global capital, this juggernaut of domestic capitalism, just you know forcing people into labor and uh, forcing you to domestic work, but ultimately it really is just that good a season, and it's something that the other Wild Brain seasons tend to try to do, but they just don't, and it is disheartening that they do try. I've had my things about Prime Empire. I would have liked. I myself am a comp sci student. I mean, obviously, I'm not well read in theory, as you might have noticed from the entire last hour. I should have put this at the very beginning of the episode. I am not, in fact, well read in theory at all. I'm a complete head ass. I understand the motives, and I've listened to a ton of well, Michael Parenti, Slavoj Žižek, uh, Chapo Trap House. Yeah, I understand the ideas. If we post this on Twitter, please do not cancel me. But I am not, in fact, perfectly well versed. I, I I absorb the vibes while I'm trying to play around with my Lego blocks, and I, you know, exhale them. I absorb the vibes and I just breathe them right back out, regurgitate them sometimes. Oh, but uh, oh God, what was that supposed to lead off of? Yeah, with Prime Empire. Yeah, okay. Uh, like I'm a comp sci student. I guess I know a little programming. I've done a little programming, a fair amount. Uh, Certainly the way it's coded, the way that Unagami is written in the show is not necessarily the way programming work. I feel like it is to his detriment how he is treated in the show because he should be a far greater force. He should, after all, this is his game. He is a major player in it, and yet he is not. Fuck me. He is not, in fact. Did I kill the power or something? Ah, yeah, he is not, in fact, given that kind of treatment. He's written almost to the side, which is unfortunate. And the important thing about Unagami is that he's a important character. I mean, no, he should be a more important character, if anything. It is his game. It is his brain. And I've heard the argument that it is in fact a neural network in which Unagami is only but a part of, which is developed far greater than Unagami, or that he is the creator. But narratively, I mean, narratively speaking, you have a twist villain, essentially. I hate that word. I hate the way what's that guy with the crab Avi? Shafrillis. I hate the way he describes it. I hate the way he talks about it. And I fucking hate the word. But the point is, he is a villain that is revealed later on. And whose identity is revealed later on. And unlike Skull Sword, unlike Vangelis, it does not narratively just like come together. Now, if the game you can reveal that the game has a mind of its own. Maybe the currency system works in a certain logic. It's not, I mean, maybe it follows our economics, or maybe it is entirely just neurotic in a way, and just as much a if just as much like irrational as you would expect from a human being or a human kid. After all, this AI is only so sophisticated, and maybe it could get more sophisticated. It's a 30-year-old AI, and you are only made aware that this is a game that is very good and is developed by a genius, and he may or may not have control of it. The game has a mind of its own. They're looking for Unagami, who runs the game. It is implied he runs the game. And so everything works in that favor. Unagami maybe he raises the stakes higher. He his trainers, the parts of him like Okino or Racer 7, they try harder. You get an arc, an episode like I Am Okino. That could essentially work as I Am Unagami. It's essentially a way for the storytellers to tell you who Unagami is, but through a different character. And so, you get the idea that this reoccurring idea of like failing to do your task, or even being programmed to fail that task, or your objective being to, yeah, basically the idea is like to fail your task, but then uh, or succeed in your task, but then like fail because you've gotten it to another level, another level of difficulty. After all, that's what Unagami is programmed to do: give the gamer the hardest experience possible. You know, you get a more interesting idea if Unagami is in fact just not sure what he's doing. He's trying to reach infinity, and that's impossible. And he's trying to reach perfection. He can't stop because that is his directive, if anything. And so you get the idea. Okino, for example, gets better and better at helping his trainees. He loses a lot of them and eventually gets them there. But no matter what he can do, the levels get harder because as as much as he tries to get better, they get harder at it. Or things get harder for him. Uh, and certainly Racer 7, tries to win the race. Every time she does better, she gets closer to the finish line, but she is doomed to fail. Maybe not even just at a specific point. Potentially, like because the AI is just varied enough, she fails at any stage, and it is not certain how she does it. Uh, and really, when you get down to it, yeah, it's just Prime Empire is a missed opportunity because you can develop this character and simultaneously not tell you who he is. You can reveal him later on. It's very similar to like how Master of the Mountain. I mean, I've rewatched the finale with and without having watched the entire season beforehand. And what you need is that you need what is it? You need the background to make it work, and the finale does not work without a without a reinforcing moment, I guess. Without like, an understanding of who this character is. We understand Unagami is frustrated, and he's not sure why he was abandoned when he did his best, when he reached for infinity. And, he's simply a child. This is all wonderful stuff, and yet it is not necessarily, it doesn't work because, what is it? We don't know really who Unagami is. The game is not designed directly as Unagami, with its own mind. We do not get this, idea of failure and an idea of like seeking more success. Certainly, that's a thing with video games, isn't it? Seeking to get better and better at a certain level, uh, and you know, as much as that's there, maybe like taking a break, taking a moment to think, maybe even taking a moment to just like chill. And yeah, it's a missed opportunity really, and it's unfortunate because it is one of those it's one of the characters that Ninjago's gotten the closest to getting really well. or no, getting it right really well, to getting very good, to making very interesting. Because Unagami's relationship to Milton Dyer, or his existence as a character, is interesting because it's different from most of our other robot or binary characters. After all, he's only programmed for one thing, and he's developed his own personality around that. And ultimately, he feels like he can't really succeed. Uh, but yeah, ultimately, it's just unfortunate. And yeah, Prime Empire could have been better. With Seabound, I don't know. I'd be interested in seeing like a successor. I've mentioned this before, very similar to Master of the Mountain, but like complicated. Uh, Bentho goes back, thinks about getting the heir to the throne, but given that both kings have just died in very quick succession, it seems a little sus that they have. And weave that into Kai's narrative of not being sure what to do now that he's lost his sister, someone he would reach out for the purposes of, you know, or who he reached out for to save way back on his first adventure, essentially. The only reason he came out to, like, become a ninja, I was gonna say come out, or come out like that, but the point is, you have the potential for. I'm sure next year is gonna be great. Really, I have no idea what they're gonna do with the Merlopia because they're probably never uh, retreading that ground. But it would be interesting to see a political intrigue season involving them, in which Bentho and Gripe or a cousin vies for power, and eventually, uh, this relates back into like the ninjas' issues with it. Maybe the ninja don't feel like they belong. Maybe even Bentho doesn't feel like he wants to be a monarch, or he wants to campaign for monarchy, or he wants to defend himself. Campaign for monarchy. Yeah, that's how we do it. You elect a king. Uh, but yeah, wow. The guys still aren't here. It's been 2 hours. Man, it's been a really slow 3 o'clock afternoon, huh? Okay, I really hope we can get this episode in before the deadline because they've been pushing it back a lot, and I realize this has been incoherent outside of the first part, and then after that it's been meandering. I'm hoping Gry can edit out a ton of it because there's a lot of white noise in the middle. There's a lot of muttering. There's a lot of uhs. I repeat myself a lot. In fact, I do 2 or 3 TLDRs that are just repetitions of myself because I forgot an entire part, and I apologize because that was a clear mistake. But yeah, uh, whoa, there's your episode tonight. Have fun.